The evening seemed normal at first, quiet in a way that felt almost comforting, yet there was an unseen tension in the air that neither Ethan Parker nor his wife Claire could fully ignore. The house in their Ohio neighborhood was neat and familiar, filled with the soft sounds of routine, dishes clinking, the low hum of appliances, the distant noise of cars passing by. Ethan moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, unaware that this ordinary moment was about to change the way he understood his marriage. Claire sat at the dining table, her posture stiff, her fingers lightly touching the surface as if grounding herself. She had been thinking all day, rehearsing words that felt too heavy to speak. When she finally said Ethan's name, it wasn't loud or dramatic, but it carried a seriousness that made him stop immediately. He turned toward her and saw something in her expression that unsettled him, not anger, not blame, but a quiet sadness that felt deeper than any argument they had ever had. She told him she needed to ask for something important, something that scared her, and even before she explained, Ethan felt his chest tighten. As she spoke, her voice steady but fragile, she told him she felt lost inside their marriage, like she had slowly faded into a version of herself she barely recognized. She made it clear she wasn't accusing him or trying to hurt him, she spoke with honesty, choosing her words carefully, as if she knew they could leave permanent marks. When she said she wanted space, not separation, not divorce, but time to breathe and understand herself, the word space echoed painfully in Ethan's mind. He struggled to process it, his thoughts racing through memories of their early years together, the laughter, the plans, the shared dreams. He asked why, his voice controlled but strained, and Claire explained that loving him had never been the problem. The problem was that she felt like she had stopped loving herself. She admitted there was someone from her past she had reconnected with, not romantically, not secretly, but emotionally enough to make her question things she had buried for years. She emphasized that nothing inappropriate had happened, that honesty mattered more than comfort, and that this realization frightened her as much as it hurt him. Ethan felt a deep mix of shock and confusion. He didn't feel betrayed in the usual sense, but the pain was sharp because it came from truth rather than deception. As she spoke, he noticed the way her hands trembled slightly, how carefully she avoided placing blame, and it became clear this request was not made lightly. Claire explained that she didn't want to slowly destroy their marriage by pretending everything was fine while resentment and confusion grew in silence. She wanted them to face the reality together, even if it meant discomfort and fear. Ethan listened, torn between his instinct to protect what they had and his need to understand her pain. The room felt smaller, the familiar walls suddenly witnessing a turning point neither of them could escape. He realized this was not just a request for distance, but a test of trust, communication, and love at its most vulnerable. As the silence settled between them, heavy and unresolved, Ethan understood that whatever choice came next would define not just their marriage, but who they were becoming as individuals. The night continued quietly, but nothing about it was ordinary anymore, because the question Claire had placed between them demanded courage, honesty, and a decision that could either slowly pull them apart or force them to confront their bond in a way they never had before. The days after Claire's request moved quickly but felt heavy, as if time itself had changed its rhythm inside the house, pushing both of them forward while holding their hearts back. Ethan shifted into the spare bedroom without argument, carrying his pillow and a few clothes, trying to act calm even though every step felt like a quiet loss. The room was clean and empty, a sharp contrast to the shared space he had known for years, and at night he lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to familiar sounds now filled with distance. He replayed Claire's words again and again, searching for something he had missed, wondering when love had slowly turned into routine without him noticing. During the day, he buried himself in work, designing buildings with careful precision while his thoughts wandered to the cracks forming in his own life. His coworkers noticed he spoke less, smiled less, and often stared at his screen as if answers might appear if he looked long enough. Claire moved through the house quietly, polite but distant, as if she were a guest unsure of the rules. She cooked meals but often ate alone, went for long walks to clear her mind, and avoided long conversations because she didn't trust her emotions yet. The house, once full of shared noise and easy laughter, now felt divided by invisible walls. One evening, Ethan cleaned the garage to distract himself and found an old photo tucked inside a box. It showed Claire years earlier, standing on a beach in California, hair blown by the wind, smiling without effort, full of life and confidence. The image struck him deeply, not with jealousy or anger, but with sadness, as he wondered when that joy had faded and whether he had been too busy to notice. That night, unable to hold the weight alone, he knocked on Claire's door and asked to talk. She agreed, sitting on the edge of the bed, her posture tense but open. Ethan spoke honestly, asking whether this distance was really about someone else or about something broken between them. Claire answered with truth rather than comfort, explaining that her struggle wasn't driven by another person, but by a growing sense of losing herself within expectations and responsibility. She admitted she felt scared of becoming someone who lived only through habit, and that fear had pushed her to question everything. Ethan listened carefully, choosing not to interrupt, even when the words hurt. He told her he felt pushed aside, unsure of where he fit in her search for meaning, and she acknowledged his pain without trying to defend herself. There was no shouting, no blame, just two people facing a quiet reality they had avoided for too long. After the conversation, nothing was magically fixed, but something shifted. The truth, though painful, created a strange clarity. The distance remained, but it was no longer filled with confusion alone, it carried understanding as well. Outside, the nights grew colder, and inside the house, both Ethan and Claire began to realize that this time apart was not just about space, but about facing who they were becoming and whether their love was strong enough to grow beyond comfort into something deeper and more honest. The weeks that followed moved faster on the surface but felt intense underneath, pushing both Ethan and Claire toward decisions they could no longer avoid. Ethan began therapy, not because he knew the outcome he wanted, but because he needed clarity, and each session forced him to speak truths he had ignored, about fear of loss, about silence, about how love could slowly turn quiet without warning. He learned that holding a marriage together did not always mean holding it tightly, and that sometimes strength came from listening instead of fixing. Claire, on her side, spent long hours alone, walking through parks, sitting in cafes with a notebook she barely wrote in, thinking about her past, her present, and the future she was afraid to choose. One afternoon, she met the person from her past in a public place, calm and open, hoping for answers but unsure what she was really searching for. The conversation was polite and reflective, but it felt different than she expected. The familiarity was there, but the connection felt shallow, like reading an old chapter that no longer matched the rest of the book. She realized she wasn't missing that person at all, she was missing a version of herself that no longer existed, and chasing it would only keep her stuck. The meeting ended without drama, but with clarity that surprised her. When Claire returned home earlier than planned, her expression was serious and thoughtful, not excited or guilty. She found Ethan in the living room and told him she had met the person, choosing honesty over delay. Ethan felt a moment of tension, but he stayed calm and listened as she explained that the meeting had shown her what she truly wanted, not escape, not distraction, but growth. She admitted that fear and boredom had pushed her to question their marriage, not because it lacked love, but because it had become quiet and predictable, and she had mistaken comfort for loss. Claire told Ethan she didn't want distance anymore, she wanted effort, honesty, and rebuilding, even if it meant facing uncomfortable truths. Ethan responded with care but firmness, telling her the space had hurt him, that trust had been shaken, but that her honesty mattered more than pretending nothing had happened. He explained that love, for him, meant choosing each other daily, even when feelings were unclear, and he asked whether she was ready to choose that again. Claire answered without hesitation, saying she was ready to stop running and start showing up, not as someone searching for escape, but as a partner willing to grow. The moment wasn't dramatic or loud, but it was real, grounded in truth rather than fear. They didn't solve everything that day, but they crossed an important line together, understanding that the hardest part of love was not attraction or passion, but commitment when comfort faded. As they sat together, speaking openly for the first time in weeks, both realized that the test they feared most had not ended their marriage, but had forced them to see it clearly, and now the future depended not on promises, but on daily choices made with honesty and care. The rebuilding did not feel slow, but it was not easy either, and from the moment Ethan and Claire chose to move forward, life seemed to test their decision in quiet but meaningful ways. They began with counseling, sitting side by side in a small office, learning how to speak without defending and how to listen without planning replies, and each session peeled away habits they had carried for years. At home, Ethan moved back into their shared bedroom, not as a victory but as a promise to try again, and the familiar space felt new, filled with both hope and caution. They created small routines that belonged only to them: morning coffee without phones, evening walks where they talked about fears instead of schedules, and these simple moments slowly rebuilt trust. Claire learned to speak when she felt overwhelmed instead of pulling away, and Ethan learned to ask questions instead of assuming silence meant distance. There were days when old doubts surfaced, when a quiet look or delayed message stirred fear, but instead of letting it grow, they faced it together with honesty. Over time, laughter returned, not loud or careless, but warm and real, rooted in understanding rather than habit. One evening, months later, they sat on the porch watching the sky change colors, the world moving calmly around them, and Claire spoke about how close she had come to losing something precious because she was afraid of stillness. She admitted that the request she had made was never about leaving, but about being seen and understood again, and Ethan shared how the experience had taught him that love needed attention, not just loyalty. They recognized that marriage was not a finished promise, but a choice that had to be made again and again, especially when things felt uncertain. As the sun disappeared and the air cooled, they sat in quiet comfort, no longer afraid of silence because it no longer meant distance. The test that once threatened to pull them apart had reshaped their bond, not by removing flaws, but by teaching them how to face them together. Their marriage was not perfect, but it was honest, renewed by effort and understanding, and grounded in the shared decision to grow rather than run. In choosing to face the hardest moment of their relationship with truth instead of fear, Ethan and Claire found a deeper connection, one built not on ideal moments, but on resilience, forgiveness, and the courage to choose each other again.